This story begins with a doctor who tried to save a dying woman, even though his decision may land him in big trouble. Dr. Obi is the doctor following up on a pregnant woman called Grace. That evening, he was on duty when Grace was rushed to the emergency unit. Dr. Obi was aware of the no blood transfusion instruction on his patient's folder. Her husband reminded them not to transfer blood to her no matter the situation, but immediately they closed the doors of the theater. Dr. Obi went against their instructions. On the day of discharge, he went to Grace's room and told her that I knowingly violated your instructions, because I believed it was the only way to save your life. If you decide to report me, I will accept whatever consequences follow. She understood the situation, and promised not to make trouble. After Grace left, he wondered if she pardoned him because she recognized him. Grace and Dr. Obi were high school classmates and friends. Everyone thought they were dating, but they were not. Dr. Obi obviously loved Grace, but couldn't confess to her. He wanted to become a better version of himself before he could. His parents had sent him to his village in Imo State, in 2007, when he was 15, to live with his grandmother. That was where he met Grace, a 14-year-old. By 2009, he was 17, and had graduated from high school before traveling back to Lagos, to meet his parents, a city so many kilometers away from Imo State. Grace didn't have a phone, so they lost contact. When he got to Lagos, they sent him abroad to study medicine, so he could succeed their hospital. He returned after 8 years. By then, he was 25, and it was 2017. He rushed to the village to meet Grace, only to be told that she had married a year earlier, and that her husband had taken her to the city. He was heartbroken, but there was nothing he could do. He returned to the city to take over his parents' hospital. Then, one day, a pregnant woman walked into his office. It was Grace. Unfortunately, Grace didn't recognize him anymore because he had grown a full beard, become taller, and matured. Back at Grace's house, days after she got home, she felt restless until she confessed her taboo to her husband. He didn't take it lightly, and suggested suing the doctor. But Grace disagreed with him. From that day, he started treating her badly and barely touched their daughter. This went on for 2 years before she divorced him and moved to her friend's apartment. It was 2019 then, and she was 26 years old. She started struggling and looking for a job. Eventually, she got one in that same hospital as a secretary. So, she and Dr. Obi saw each other often. He would always ask about her baby, and she would always reply, "Fine." After a few months, she was posted to Dr. Obi's office as his personal secretary. They started attending meetings together. One day, they closed late after a meeting, and had a lot to drink, especially Grace, who couldn't handle alcohol well. She became tipsy, and Dr. Obi offered to take her home. On their way, he asked her about her baby again, and why he had not been seeing her with her ring. Grace broke down and poured out her heart to the doctor. He could feel her pain as tears rolled down her cheeks. He listened quietly as she emptied her heart. Finally, they got to her apartment. He walked her to the door and handed her over to her friend. The next day at work, Grace had already forgotten everything that happened the previous night. Dr. Obi called her into his office to discuss it. She was shocked. He offered her accommodation, but she turned it down. He insisted and told her to take it as him making up for what he had caused her. He added that she could leave whenever she was able to get a place of her own. At that point, she accepted his offer. By the close of work that same day, he drove her to pick up her daughter and their belongings. When they arrived at his huge mansion, he introduced Grace to his housekeeper, and instructed the housekeeper to make them comfortable. Grace was grateful for her new apartment. Dr. Obi provided for Grace and her daughter, Princess. He enrolled Princess in a crèche and had the housekeeper take care of her while her mother focused on her job. He took Princess shopping and bought her new things while Grace tagged along. Dr. Obi knew that Grace would not accept going shopping with him, so he used that opportunity to buy her beautiful things. They lived like one big happy family, until one day, Dr. Obi and Grace came home and found Isabella. Earlier that day, Isabella had called to tell him she was in town. Dr. Obi was avoiding her, so he told her he was busy and asked her to lodge in a hotel. He was surprised to see Isabella in his house. Without hesitation, she threw herself at Dr. Obi and gave him a peck. He immediately pushed her away before walking quickly to catch up with Grace, who was already heading to her room. Inside the room, he tried explaining himself to Grace. She replied, "I have no business with your private life." But her aura suddenly went cold. Dr. Obi left the room and went to settle scores with Isabella. He asked her to leave immediately. Instead, she pleaded with him to let her spend the night and leave early the next morning. Dr. Obi reluctantly instructed the housekeeper to show her to the guest room. The next day was a Saturday. Grace didn't go to work, and Dr. Obi went out to hang out with his friends, but Isabella did not leave, as she had promised. Instead, she confronted Grace and demanded to know what she was doing with her fiancés. She hurled insults at Grace, calling her a mistress with a bastard. That same night, Dr. Obi returned home drunk and passed out in his room. The next morning, he woke up, only to find Isabella sleeping beside him.
What?
He freaked out. Immediately, he threw her out of his room. Then, he warned her, "If I ever find you in my house again, I'll kill you." At that point, he was too ashamed to face Grace. Later that day, he finally stepped out of his room. But there was no sign of Grace, or Princess. The housekeeper explained that Grace had left the previous day after her confrontation with Isabella. Dr. Obi immediately called Grace. He had been blocked.
What?
Without wasting another second, he drove straight to her friend's apartment, but they weren't there. Her friend refused to tell him anything. Disappointed, he returned home and drowned his anger in alcohol. He tried to console himself. "I'll meet her in the office tomorrow." The next morning, he arrived at the hospital with renewed hope. Instead, HR handed him Grace's resignation letter. He refused to approve it. Rather, he instructed HR to tell Grace to consider her absence as paid leave and return whenever she felt ready. 1 month passed. Grace never returned. Dr. Obi still couldn't reach her. Determined not to give up, he looked for another way to reach her. He began sending her money. Each transfer came with a short message. "Please, unblock me." Another one said, "Please come back, for the sake of Princess." Then another, "Please, give me a chance to explain myself." Even though Grace never responded, he kept sending enough money to take care of both her and Princess. About 3 months into the paid leave, it was almost Dr. Obi's 27th birthday. So, he sent her money again. This time, the description read, "Gift me a visit, and I'll free you."
I pretend I'm okay, but I'm breaking inside.